Hey everyone, welcome. I am so excited to be here. Um, Kicking off the morning for the Global Grief Conference. I guess if you're in the US, it's the morning. Uh, Kicking off the afternoon for you people in Europe. And I don't even know what time it is on the other side of the world, but I am here and ready to roll. And today so I want to just introduce myself a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how to go from paralyzed to empowered and in this brief amount of time. And then I'm actually doing on the other segment in the workshop segment right after this, I'm doing a sacred space healing for those of you that have done that with me before. That's just a really lovely time to be together. And so today, I want to thank everyone who put this together, all the people on the back end. Like, I still don't know how they do this. So it's absolutely amazing. And just getting all of this together for the first year, it's been going so well so far. If you are catching this right now, this goes all the way through the weekend and into the early morning on Monday morning. So continue to stop back in and check out the other presenters and workshops going on this entire weekend. And so my name is Michelle Vande. I don't have a slideshow this week, or for this presentation, so you're just going to get me. And I am a life purpose empowerment coach for women after loss. And so something that is unique about me in this space and that people often get me confused with is like someone who is a grief counselor, um, or like a grief therapist. I am My focus is more on life coaching, and I have a grief lens on it, which means I am able to have that compassion for grief and loss and allow you to have those feelings, allow you to be able to process through those things while moving forward and achieving your goals and your dreams. So I am really here to help you. For those of you that feel like you're at this place of not wanting to feel stuck anymore or wanting to get out of survival mode. Survival mode is so important. It's an important part of our grief because that's how we survive, right? The when you're just like going through the motions, when you have the brain fog and you don't know left from right, up from down, but you're just getting through every single day, that survival mode is important and valuable because that's how you literally survive every single day. And I know going through my grief that was a really important time for me. And so a little bit of a backstory for me. I'm in Wisconsin, so I am in Central Time. For anyone who's in Wisconsin, feel free to like put in the chat if you're from Wisconsin or like anywhere you're watching. Actually, just say hi and share where you're from. I should be able to see the comments. So just share where you're from. And um, and so for me, I it's interesting to be part of this grief world, because grief is a big part of this grief lens is a big part of what I do. But for me, growing up, I didn't feel like grief was a big part of me, because I only saw grief as like something you experience after the death of someone. And I was lucky enough to grow up where I didn't experience that much as a child. It wasn't until my nephew died in 2016 that it really threw me. He had significant special needs, and I was his primary caretaker for about 5 years. And so when he died, I lost my job. I lost my person that I was with almost every single day for about 8 to 9 hours a day. And it was just so hard. And we had this deep connection. And then, unfortunately, in 2018, my son died. Um, and he was about 12 weeks old when he died. My nephew that died was about 7 years old um, when he died. And it's just a very interesting situation, because both of these boys had special needs for different reasons, but they presented themselves very similarly. And so after my son died, I really got into this deep depression. I had PTSD, anxiety, all of the things, right? And I believe those things are there to really help us in that survival mode. But I got to this point about 6 months after James died that I was just like at this place of like, I don't want to be in survival mode anymore. And the amount of time that you're in survival mode, there's no timeline on grief, and there's no really timeline for you to try to expedite it. If you don't want to expedite it, if you're still in survival mode and you're good with being there, that's okay. And at the same time, if you're in survival mode and you don't want to stay there, I'm your person. I'm your person that can help you go from survival into really thriving and being excited about life without feeling like you're leaving your person behind, or you're leaving your old life behind. But what really happens when death and loss happens is you're losing a piece of you. I lost a big part of who I was, because not only was James my son, so I lost a piece of being a mom, even though I also have a living daughter as well. She was 4 at the time. Um, but I lost he was because he was a special needs child. For anyone who has a special needs child, like your life really revolves around them with extra doctor's appointments. And he was G-tube fed, so like feeding him was a process, like everything was a process. And so that really becomes your life. And so when that all of a sudden ends, it's like, well, who am I now? I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? Like I couldn't find who I was. And what I've come to realize is, because during that time, this place of like trying to find who I was and not knowing who I was, it's because I was trying to go back to the person I used to be. Can you relate with that? With like trying to go back to the person you used to be, because that person that felt safe being that person, right? Because life was what you knew it to be as that person. So you knew yourself as that person, and as that person, your as that person for yourself, your person who died was still alive too. So you're trying to get back to that person, but really, there's really no way for you to get back to that person fully. So what that means for you is that getting to acceptance is very important, and accepting the fact that you need to be able to move forward, and that maybe now is not the right time, but maybe it is the right time for you to say, okay, it's time for me to move forward, but I don't know what to do next. What is that next step? I don't know where I want to go. And like seeing that future, right, is can be so difficult. And that's what I help my clients do is help them to see the future and see that you can experience joy, love, fun, excitement, adventure, and still honor your person at the same time. It doesn't, they don't have to be separate. Something that I talk about often is the and. This is a mug from actually a fellow bereaved mom uh, that talks about this living in the and, where it's like you're living for your person that died and you're living for the person that you are right now. And so I have the and symbol here, and then she customized it. So I have both of my kids' names on here. And this is my reminder that Abigail is here now for me. So this is me reminding me to live in the present. And at the same time, I can be honoring my son who's no longer on earth at the same time. So I really want you to start grasping that concept of this and getting out of the either or mentality. And with, societal norms, with, being brought up, depending on how you're brought up, so often we were taught like that something is either right or wrong, that it's either this way or that way. And that's really not the case. And that's what I've really found with a lot of things in life, not just with grief and loss, but it's very prevalent with grief and loss, that this and is so important. So I actually have the same symbol right behind me in my office. This says joy and grief. So that's my reminder that I can experience joy and grief at the same time, and it's okay. And so I want that for each and every one of you. So how do we go from being paralyzed, that paralyzed feeling, so that's like being in survival mode, to feeling empowered in our grief? One of the ways that so many people that I've been watching and taking a part of their workshops and things throughout this global grief conference is honoring your grief, honoring your emotions, honoring your own processing through that, and then figuring out how do you want to move forward. And so I talk a lot about in my coaching program. I use the emotional guidance scale from Abraham Hicks, for those of you that are familiar with her. And this is really important. So I'm going to show you a couple things. So I'm not using slides, but I'm going to be using some visual aids. So this is the emotional guidance scale. And down here at the bottom is fear, grief, and powerlessness and depression. And at the very top is joy, appreciation, empowerment, freedom, and love. So I help my clients go from here to here. The key is what's so beautiful about this emotional guidance scale is, and one of the purposes that she did with creating this, is that you don't need to try and figure out how to go from down here to up here in a moment. That you can actually work your way through all of these things, so you can work your way up to being in more joy and freedom and love more frequently. But sometimes it takes getting to the hatred first, moving up to hatred. So it goes from fear and grief to up to insecurity and guilt and unworthiness. A lot of my clients deal with unworthiness, and that's a big thing that I help them through. Then it moves up to jealousy, hatred and rage, revenge, anger, discouragement, blame, worry, doubt, disappointment, overwhelm, frustration, impatience, pessimism, boredom. And then number 7 is contentment. This is where the tides kind of turn. Hopefulness, optimism, positive expectation, enthusiasm, happiness, passion is number 2. And then 1 is joy, empowerment, freedom, and love. And so you don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to go from here to here. All you need to figure out is how to go from here to here, just one step. And as you're moving one step above the other, it becomes, it's not as daunting, because that's where I felt lost. Yeah, isn't that, Joshua? The scale concept is great. I love this. I use this as, it's such a powerful tool. And this is something you can just Google, as Abraham Hicks emotional guidance scale. And it's that reminder, again, it's this reminder to say, like, you can honor where you're at, and it's okay where you're at. And I think that's what makes what I do so unique as far as life coaching and helping people get back on track, is I have this grief lens. Now, everyone in this community is doing that grief work, but the people that are doing the life coaching, the life purpose type of stuff, not many people have that grief lens. So that's where that uniqueness comes in, and knowing that it's okay for you to have these moments and that you can also move ahead and move ahead. And we're just trying to get one step at a time, that you don't have to feel so overwhelmed by trying to do it all at once, or doing it in one day, or doing it in one week, because it can take some time and some work. And so this is another handout that I use to really try to explain this now, from going from paralyzed or stuck into empowerment. And so what this is this is from stuck to empowered. And what I'm going to show you is, so you're trying to go from here to here. This is where, like, so this is stuck. This is, and then this is your vision, your passion and your purpose is over here. But then we have this right here in the middle. And what this really is this is the stuck cycle. So I'll put it a little bit closer. So it shows the stuck cycle. And what happens is you start moving forward, right? You start like getting up out of bed and you're like, "Hey, I got out of bed today. That's great. Hey, I made myself food and I ate today. That's great." And you feel like you're starting to make these steps, moving these steps forward and forward. But and then as you're moving forward, you get to the edge of this comfort zone that you have. This can also, like, some people call it the upper limit. And then what happens is it gets scary because you start moving forward. And so what happens is your upper limit, or what I call your conditioned self, starts to show up and say, "Hey, it's not safe for you to go here anymore. So we're going to go back again. We're going to go back because I don't want you to get hurt again." So I'm going to talk about this concept of the conditioned self versus the authentic self. And so because this is what I'm finding with my clients is the death or the loss that they've experienced typically brings to the surface things from their childhood. And this is what it did for me too. It brought up things from my childhood that I didn't fully process then. And so what my clients are often working through is things from their childhood that have just been brought to the surface from this loss or this death. And so I really have to like go back to go forward, but it's not about rehashing and reliving childhood stuff. It's about healing our childhood, um, the things from our childhood. And so when we are born into our authentic selves. And this is what our, like, how we come in our as our spiritual beings having a human experience, is we come as our authentic selves, as this light with love and joy and happiness. Like, we don't know anything else. But then as we're growing up, we start to see these patterns from typically our parents that have been living in their conditioned selves for a while, these protective patterns that they have developed over time to again protect them. And so we then either do one of two things. We create very similar protective patterns that they have had for their lives, or we create new ones to protect us from whatever has been happening in our life. And so we start to really live life in our conditioned self. And our conditioned self comes from fear. It comes from scarcity. It comes from um, all of these is more of like a fear-based actions. And then our authentic selves are more loving, faith, and trust-based actions, and living, not just actions, but just how we live. And so a big piece of what I do with my clients is help them to start recognizing when they're in their conditioned selves and when they're in their authentic selves. Because when I can help them shift into authentic self, then they're able to make decisions that actually align more with their life purpose. It aligns with who they actually want to become, instead of them staying stuck then in this stuck cycle. Because the conditioned self is there. The conditioned self isn't like, quote unquote bad. Like, I don't like to call things bad or good. What the conditioned self is there for is to actually help keep you safe. And so because you've been hurt from this loss, the conditioned self shows up. And when it shows up, it's there to say, "Okay, I don't want you to get hurt again. I don't want you to have this deep grief again." So anytime we get close to anything that feels really good, that feels like more aligned with my your life purpose, I'm just going to stop you because I don't want you to get hurt, because if it doesn't work out, you're going to get hurt again. That's the conditioned self-talking, and it can show up in lots of different ways. It can show up by by sickness, like physical manifestations of it. So by getting sick, oftentimes when I do speaking engagements like this, my throat starts getting sore because that's like me getting on the edge of my comfort zone. The more I do speaking, the less that is an issue for me, because I've learned to work through that and recognize my conditioned self and say, okay, I don't need to stop what I'm doing. I need to take care of myself. So I do things in a way that that I can nurture my throat, that I say, okay, I'm not going to stop because of my conditioned self. I'm going to recognize it and say, this is happening. This is my conditioned self. It's okay, but I'm not going to stay in this place. And so I've had to learn that. My clients have had to learn that. And so it can also just come up as like, tech issues. We have a group for all of the speakers here, and we were talking yesterday and the day before about tech issues happening. Tech issues happen all the time when you're on the edge of your comfort zone, and that's your conditioned self. So here's what happens is when the tech issues happen, then your conditioned self is saying, see, you shouldn't do that. That's scary. That's bad. So these tech issues happen, and your conditioned self tells you, oh, no, don't go there. Don't do that. That's scary. And what I can do, or what you can do then, is to start learning how to shift from conditioned self to authentic self. Hey, okay, so I was just reading some of Joshua. At what age do children commonly become conditioned self? It's different for all children. And it just depends on parents. And again, and here's the other thing. We don't need to be judgmental for our parents, because they're doing what they know based on their upbringing. And oftentimes as parents, we always want to do a little bit better than our parents did. There's things that we love that our parents did, and there's things that we didn't like that our parents did. So we're trying to do better. But if we're trying to do better and we're not recognizing that we're trying to do better, but we're still in our conditioned selves, and we have these patterns that a lot of times, again, they're generational patterns. So if you are really like standing firm as like, I want to break this generational pattern, that can be really difficult. That can be really difficult. And so you're going to get a lot of pushback from conditioned self as well. And so so a lot of times, especially for like spirited kids, or like for me, I was very, you can probably tell just from my energy now, like very loud and like outgoing, and always doing something and always moving. And oftentimes I got told, Michelle, be quiet, like be quiet. Or so like I was being told, it's not okay for me to be myself, because in my authentic self. And oftentimes kids are, right? That doesn't mean that we can't teach them when it's appropriate to talk and when it's inappropriate to talk, but we shouldn't be like saying like, hey, shut up, like it's not your turn to talk. But oftentimes we tell kids to be quiet, right? We tell kids to stop. We tell kids it's not okay. When we used to go to church with our daughter, it was a traditional Catholic church, and she wanted to dance during songs. And for anyone who has gone to a Catholic service before, it's like, that is not okay. Or it's not, no one does that. But I was like, if she wants to be in the aisle and dance during music, why can't she? So I let her dance. When the priest was talking, we made sure she was sitting down. But like, why can't kids be able to express themselves? And I've had to learn to let go of some of that, because I had to learn to let go of like the judgment then of everyone around me being like, why is she letting her kid do this? But let's embrace our children and let them be themselves and express themselves in those ways. And when we don't, that's when we're suppressing their authentic selves. And not all kids are like that. But there's different ways that kids try to express themselves, and then us as adults, because again, conditioning, not just from our parents, but from societal conditioning as well, that we are taught like it's not okay. Like for me, it's like, oh, it's not okay for my daughter to dance in church. I shouldn't let her do that. And it's like, no, why not? Like, who says? And so sometimes yeah, right, exactly. Yes. Yes. It can go too far and cause other issues for sure. For sure. And so yeah, so this again is like how our conditioned selves become how we start uh, operating from our conditioned selves. And so oftentimes what really happens and what one of the things that happened for me after my son died is it it opened up my eyes to be like, okay, what do I want from life? Because clearly life is way too freaking short and I could be gone tomorrow. How do I want to live my life? And I think that's one of the beautiful things that can come from death, especially like for if the death really caused you to start questioning like what am I doing with my life? It's that like wake up call to say, what am I doing? And that's almost like your authentic self kind of trying to wake you up. Like this the death or the loss didn't happen because of you, and I don't want you to think that, but from that, this like new lens, right? That this new awakening of like, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing?" But then so this is what happens with my clients. My clients are those people that are like that have this like aha moment of, "Oh my gosh, I want to do something different. I this what I'm doing right now does not fit me. I don't know what I want to do next, and I'm scared to try something different because I've been doing this way my entire life for 10 years, for 5 years, for 20 years, for 30 years. How do I completely change what I'm doing?" Because again, that's that edge of your comfort zone, right? So you're at that edge of your comfort zone and then your conditioned self says no, like just don't I don't want you to get hurt again. And even if it's a different kind of hurt, right? Like I don't want you to start a business. I don't want you to change careers because you could get hurt again and it could hurt in between here. So I'm going to keep you back. I'm going to keep you back here. And that's how we get stuck, right? That's that if you've ever experienced like the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, that's the conditioned self. So my goal for you right now is to just for you to start becoming aware of what is conditioned self and what is authentic self. So I'm going to go over a couple things. So someone who is in their conditioned self, um, or like is going in this stuck cycle, that you isolate yourself a lot. So if any of these things resonate with you, just like put in the comments, like, yes, that's something that I do or have done in the past. The um the conditioned self wants you to try and figure it out on your own. So the conditioned self wants you to think like, oh, I can do it on my own. I don't need any help. The conditioned self also lives in a state of fear, right? About don't do this because something bad could happen. The conditioned self uses addictions to avoid feelings, and addictions can show up in many ways. It can show up with alcohol and drugs. It can show up as food. For me, it was food. It can actually show up as like, um, you know, internet scrolling. It can show up as just like watching TV all the time. It can show up as shopping. It can show up in whatever way. But everyone typically has some sort of addiction that they're holding on to because of their conditioned selves, and it's to avoid feelings. The conditioned self, someone who's in their conditioned self, blames other people, blames God, blames the universe. And I know for me, I I didn't necessarily blame God, but I questioned. I was like, "Oh, F you." I went on a tirade and I swore and just like, all that kind of stuff. And I know so many of you can relate to that. Um, but we get in this this blaming and really like this victim mentality. The conditioned self procrastinates when things get hard. And this is something that I notice too in myself. So I have to recognize, okay, when am I am I procrastinating right now because I'm on the verge of something new? I'm on the edge of my comfort zone. The conditioned self makes you feel limited. Like things are limited. Like there's not enough time, there's not enough money. Those are the two big ones. Not enough time and not enough money. And if you find yourself saying that or like I can't afford it, here's a tip for you to take is instead of saying you can't afford something, start saying it's not important to me right now because it changes everything. It changes everything. Same with time. It's like either instead of saying I don't have enough time, say that's not a priority. Oh my gosh, a priority to me right now. Um, See, it's okay to laugh at yourself. It's okay to have fun. Um, yes, that's so right. As much as we like to do it alone, we often find it's a struggle and often find ourselves isolated and in a bad place. That's right. That's exactly right. Um, and so it feels limited. So change those, reframe those. So you don't have to start spending more money or doing different things with your time, but you can reframe how you're saying that. So I really work on getting away from saying, "Oh, we can't afford that." No, that's just not a priority to us right now. So what's a priority? And you can really go back and look at your calendar and look at your bank accounts. That will tell you what your priorities are. And if they don't feel aligned with where you want to go, then you need to realign your priorities. And the best way to do that is to look at your schedule or your calendar and look at your bank accounts. That's something I help my clients do, is to really realign with those things. Yes, make your grief health a priority. Yeah, and grief, like there's conditioned self grief and there's authentic self grief. Grief is authentic self, but staying in that stuck in that victim mentality, that's conditioned self. Another thing that the conditioned self does is you're gonna start comparing yourself, or not start, you're comparing yourself to other people. So often, and that's something I really talk about, especially in my group. So I offer a free group for specifically for women. For any men that want to work with me, we can talk one-on-one, but I have a group coaching program because the value of being in community and growing together is like expedites your growth. So that is specifically for women, anyone who identifies as a woman. But if there's men that are resonating with anything that I'm saying, you can feel free to reach out to me. Look me up on Facebook or Instagram, Michelle Vande. Hey, you can find me there and connect with me and say, hey, I saw you on the Global Grief Conference and I want to chat. But so getting back to what I was saying is, like, so often when I'm doing my trainings in my group, for my free group that I offer, I have to remind people, like, don't compare where you're at now to where I'm at right now, because first of all, you don't know what I went through to get to where I'm at. And also, I I've invested a lot of time and I've invested a lot of money in growing. And so, because oftentimes I find people that are like, "Oh my gosh, my loss happened 5 years ago." How, like, and you're only, I mean, now I'm 3.5 years out. But when I started doing this, I was a year and a half, 2 years after my son died, and people are like, "How are you doing this?" And it's like, I invested a lot of time and a lot of money in myself. I had 2 therapists a at at one time, at a time in my life. We were spending over $700 a month on therapy. I had a coaching program that I was a part of, like, and that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money. So if you see someone and you're inspired by where they're at, instead of comparing yourself, like the conditioned self is going to, and say, "Oh my gosh, look at that person. You can never be like that." Or, "Why aren't you there? Why aren't you where Michelle is, or whoever else you see?" And you have to ask yourself, "Well, am I willing to do what they've done?" And maybe you're at a place where you're not, and that's okay. So just honor where you're at, and wherever you're at, it's okay. If you don't like where you're at, that's okay too. And then you need to start investing time and money, and find the right places to invest. Um, and then lastly, the conditioned self keeps trying the same things over and over again and expecting different results. So this kind of goes back to what Chicken Fox was saying, is that, like, oftentimes when you're trying to do it on your own, and this is what I was trying to do. I kept trying to do it on my own. I kept trying to do it on my own. And I actually have a talk called Motivated is Overrated that came to me when I was, like, in my depression, and I was so sick of not being able to, like, get back to my regular routine. And I realized it's because I was trying to be motivated, and I couldn't motivate myself to get out of bed. I couldn't motivate myself to exercise. Like, I just didn't want to, and I didn't care about it anymore. But so I kept just trying to do it on my own over and over again. I just kept trying to do the same things over and over again. So your conditioned self, again, so going back to this cycle, right? So it's like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing great. And then your conditioned self says, you're on the edge of your comfort zone. We're going to go back here, right? So this is why you usually end up doing the same things over and over again. This is really hard because it's reversed. So this is why you end up doing the same things over and over again, because you're going here and then you get some sort of block, you hit the upper limit, the edge of your comfort zone, then you go back and then you do the same thing again because it was like, oh, I was making progress, but then again. And not saying that like sometimes you have to do things over and over again, but if you keep doing the same things and you keep getting the same results, there's something that needs to change. But the conditioned self doesn't want you to change anything. So it's going to keep telling you to just keep doing the same things over and over again. So someone who's in their authentic self and in that empowered, the empowered griever is someone who reaches out for support. And that can be difficult right away, especially if you're feeling isolated, if you feel like nobody knows what I'm going through. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. That's a big thing that I talk about with my clients too. I love Brene Brown. She talks about like belonging to yourself first, so then you can belong to the world or wherever. But that's a big piece of what I do with my clients. I have a self-love ascension program. It's a 12-week group coaching program for women, for anyone who identifies as a woman. And that program is about self-love, is about self-worth and knowing that you are worth it. Because and being able to reach out for support means that you know that you're worth that support. And so the second thing is having a team to support you. So therapist, coach, healer, whatever that is for you. And for everyone, it might be different. Maybe you need a therapist and a coach and someone who does Reiki and someone who does acupuncture. Maybe you need all those things. And I wouldn't recommend like just like doing it all at once. Start with one thing, see how that feels. If it's good, but then it's not quite enough, then you need to add a little bit more. Or if it's like, or maybe sometimes like things just also have a life cycle sort of. So it's like maybe something was good for you and now you've grown. So I'm going off here. Here's the back. This is hand drawn. You like my art? So this is growth. And now this is very, very straight and narrow almost, but we know growth. And so sometimes I like to use the zigzag instead of the steps, but for like simplicity purposes, let's just use the steps. So it's like, let's say you're down here on your journey, right? And then you moved up here because you hired a therapist. But now that you're here, that therapist that you have, or whatever you decided to do, it was great and it got you there, but maybe it can't take you to the next level. Maybe it can. Maybe that person can, because maybe they are taking you to that next level. Because I often have clients where they are here and I can take them up several stairs. But then at the same time, usually they're adding in other things, like usually energy work and things like that. But so when you're at this new level, when you're at this new place, you might need a new level of support. So what I like to share then, so let's say you're out of this stuck cycle and you actually went from here to here and you made it. You making it, that is like you going up the step. So really it's like taking that stuck cycle and putting it upwards. And let's say that arrow is now going up to here. So it's like saying like, this is, whoops, let's flip it this way. This is your step, right? This is that step up. But now you're here. So now you're at this next level here, right? But this is going to take a different level of support. And so what ends up happening is your conditioned self can start showing up in different ways. And so then you find a new stuck cycle, a new comfort zone. So you stretch your comfort zone, which is great. You got to a new level of who you are in your authentic self, but then a new level of your conditioned self can show up. The good thing about this is you are getting better at recognizing your conditioned self, even if it's shifted and changed a little bit. And you have new practices that can help you shift from conditioned self to authentic self. So you might not stay there for as long. But so every step has this. Every step you go has this. So, and that's where it can sometimes feel like you're going forward, but then you're going backwards. So I like to think when you're actually growing, you're going 2 steps forward and it feels like 1 step back, but it's not 1 step back. It's just that's your conditioned self. When you're in the stuck cycle, it's usually more like 1 step forward and 2 steps back, if that makes sense. Um, and so let's keep talking about authentic self. So authentic self has a support team. Authentic self has faith. So faith and trust, those are like the two, that's the cornerstone. That's the simplification of authentic self is faith and trust. Um, Authentic self uses loving actions to take care of themselves. So for me, and again, a question people get like ask me, especially early on when I started coaching. I've been coaching for about 2 years now. But so like right when I started, people were like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? Well, I take care of myself. I I don't schedule back-to-back meetings all the time. I don't schedule, and I give myself space during the day. Now I have that luxury and that privilege to do that, but that doesn't so it's gonna look different for you. But I make sure I take care of myself first because you cannot fill someone else's cup if your cup isn't full. And actually I think it was a colleague of mine that shared your cup, you it was, her name is Larissa, and she's amazing. She's like a burnout and recovery coach. And she said, stop trying to fill from your cup and instead fill from your saucer. And it was this picture of your cup overflowing, and then the cup had a saucer underneath it. So what, give everyone the overflow. You get your cup, and everyone else gets the overflow. And that was a really great visualization of that. Is that in order for you to take care of other people, because I know so many of you are compassionate, loving, giving people, and especially typically women, but not always, but a lot of times that feminine energy is like we always want to take care of everyone else first and we put ourselves last. You can take care of everyone else, but you got to take care of yourself first. And and so taking loving actions to take care of yourself is so important. And sometimes those loving actions can be something like a massage. Sometimes those loving actions, like for me, I show myself love by like, this is just like warm water in here. Because it's still kind of cool here in Wisconsin. Today's supposed to get like up to 60 or something, so that's fabulous. But something that I do loving for myself is holding a warm mug because it feels like a warm hug. So this is a loving action I take. And after this, in between this session and next session, I am not just going to sit here on my computer. I'm going to get up and move my body. I'm going to show my body love. So what are the loving actions you can take to show yourself love? Your authentic self accepts responsibility for your life, accepts responsibility for things in your life. Now, again, I don't want you to think that means that you caused bad things to happen in your life, but at the same time, that getting away from that blame. So this is like the opposite of blame. So saying this happened to me, but it's not still happening to me. So what can I do to move forward? And that's a really important distinction. Is moving from this is happening to me, this always happens to me, to okay, this did happen. And what am I going to do to change to move forward? Yes. Ooh, when I started developing my authentic self, I found that my truth had changed and the steps that it took to get there became a routine of self-care and self-awareness. Exactly. And that's what I found over the last couple years. And I actually have just shifted into my clients are required to go through this 12-week self-love ascension program before they can start into the life purpose program, because they need to love themselves first, because you can't be aligned with your life purpose. You can't be aligned with where you want to go in life if you don't love yourself first. And that can be so difficult, especially because I used to specifically work with grieving moms. And so our worthiness, feeling like we're worthless because we couldn't even keep our child alive, is a big thing. And going back to that unworthiness here is like down here at the bottom of this scale, unworthiness is there. That's a big one. And that comes from conditioned self as well. A lot of us are conditioned as children to think that we are not worthy, because when we're in authentic selves, we're told to be quiet, like leave the room, whatever. Like we're told to not, children should be seen but not heard. Have you heard that saying before? Like that's that societal conditioning. Another thing your authentic self does is takes positive, consistent actions. Your authentic self feels expanded. Your authentic self honors your own grief journey. right? Again, like not comparing yourself, that your journey is your journey and yours alone. That you don't have to compare yourself to other people. You don't have to try and speed up whatever process you're going through if you don't want to. And you don't have to judge yourself for where you're at. Everything that you're learning throughout this whole weekend, sometimes these ahas come and it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known, I should have known that. I was in a session yesterday with Jenny Diltz, I believe is her last name, and she talked about the shoulds. And so often we say, like, oh, I should have known that. Maybe you should have, but you didn't. So don't be hard on yourself because you didn't know it. You just didn't know it. Now you do, and now you can do something different. You didn't know that before, so you couldn't do anything different. So just like give yourself a break, right? Like give yourself some grace there. So honor your journey. And then lastly, open up to new ways of doing things to create different results, new ways of doing things. And oftentimes we need to be aligned in our authentic selves in order to be willing to try new things. So I'm going to finish with a story about how I got to where I'm at. And so after my son died, or while my son was alive, I was a stay-at-home mom and I did in-home daycare part-time. And so that's who I was. Again, this goes back to my identity. So James died, and that was in October of 2018. And then, I was trying to find myself. I was going through all of this processing, and we decided we weren't going to have any more children. And that was really hard for me. My husband, because James died in his sleep, like he was just like, I don't think I would ever sleep again having an infant in our house. And I understood that because the PTSD that came with that was traumatic, clearly PTSD, because both of us had issues where like we would go in on our 4-year-old daughter to make sure she was breathing, which typically you don't have to worry about that for a 4-year-old, right? But like I, for so long, had issue, like I would wake up in the middle of the night and have to like run to her room to make sure she was breathing. And so like I understood that, but for me, I was willing to take that risk and lose sleep because I wanted more children. He was not. And that was a very difficult decision for us as a family. But I decided that my family that is here is more important than this family that I want. And so we decided not to have any more children. But so that's when my identity, I lost who I was because my identity was wrapped up in being a stay-at-home mom, being a special needs mom, and having lots of kids around. So that was like February, March of 2019. So like 6 months later, and then move into about a year after James died. So it was about October of 2019. Abigail had started going to school full time instead of part time because she was like, went from 4K to kindergarten where they go to full days of school. My daycare kids were going to full days of school. And I'm just like, what am I going to do with myself now? I don't know what to do. I don't want to do daycare anymore. Like this was meant to be a temporary part of my life. I just thought I was going to be doing it for another 5 years, taking care of James. And I had a friend that said that we met every week, once a week, just to talk about life and goals and things like that. And she said, you need to become a health coach. And I was like, what? Because at the time I had been in the health and nutrition industry for about 10 years. And she's like, you help people get the right supplements. You help support their immune system. And, you get people off their allergy meds and all these kinds of things. Like you should actually charge them for your coaching because you're coaching them. You're just not charging them. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to charge them. I don't, no one's going to want to pay me to coach them because I'm already doing it for free. And she just reminded me, no, you need to do this. Like, what else are you going to do? And so I had to get out of my head for a moment and get into my heart and say, yeah, you're right. I like this is meant to be almost. And so I reluctantly, but like with faith and trust, right? My authentic self, my conditioned self was like going like, don't do this. This doesn't make sense. This is stupid. You're not a health coach. Like you don't have any real credentials because I'm like a self-taught health and nutrition person. So I had all these negative self-talk things coming up. And so then I had to let go and say, okay, I'm trusting my friend who is seeing me in my authentic self. So if you have that friend, again, that's that support. A support person is someone who sees you in your authentic self, not someone who sees you in your conditioned self. So she saw me in my authentic self and said, "No, this is what you should be doing." So I started doing that, and then so I opened up to something new. So this is going back to like trying doing something a different way or trying new things. And then soon after that, um, I came across this woman who certifies people to become holistic life coaches. And for me, I was like, okay, I definitely didn't want to be a health coach. There's no way I want to be a life coach because life coaches are like the epitome of coaches. I feel like there's so many life coaches out there. Like, why do we need another life coach? But there was something about this woman. I can't even tell you what it was, but something drew me. My heart. My heart drew me because there was something like, because what I was noticing with my current clients at the time is they need to work on their mindset and less on their what to eat, what not to eat, how to move, all that kind of stuff. They need to work on their mindset. And so I wasn't actively looking for a certification, but this was suggested to me from someone that was also a holistic professional. And so when I came across this and she offered her program, it was a coaching program for holistic professionals and then plus a certification to become a holistic life coach. And for me, hi Dee, welcome. For me, I was like, my head was telling me this is too expensive. You don't have the time. You don't want to be a life coach. Don't do this. But my heart was saying yes. And my heart didn't have any logic. There was no logic. There was no rhyme or reason behind it. It was just me. I'm so thankful that I allowed myself to listen to my heart and stop listening to my head. Because so often we listen to our heads when we're trying to move to that next place. We try to do the logical thing. We try to do the smart thing. And oftentimes the logical thinking, like there's a place for being practical, and I'm practical in a lot of ways. I like to be, make sure, I'm frugal and helping the planet by, not taking a straw whenever possible, like those kinds of things. I'm very practical in that way and like living within our means. But then at the same time, some of that practicality or some of that logic thinking is conditioned self-thinking. Sometimes we just need to go in, and that's where when you can connect to your body and connect to like your heart, you can really start moving forward from this authentic self, from your aligned self. And that's when these opportunities. So if I wouldn't have said yes to health coaching, I wouldn't be here today. I'm no longer a health coach. And when I started that certification, I was still planning on just being a health coach, but with a life coach certification. But it was in my life coaching certification during a meditation that I just got this like, woof, you need to help grieving moms because you have a profound story and you can help women like you that don't want to get on meds or don't feel good on meds and that like want to feel healthy, joyful, and vibrant again. And so it was during that I had to be open to trying new things in order for all of this to come to fruition. And then in another meditation, the name of my company came to me, Light of Love Coaching. All of that happened because I was open. And now I'm saying this because it's hard to be open. Like I said, like I had all of these logical thoughts, like it's too expensive. I don't have enough time. Like, what am I doing even? Like, this doesn't make sense. Your conditioned self often says, this doesn't make sense. Hey, Elena, welcome. Oh, I love you. Your conditioned self often says this doesn't make sense. Your authentic self will say, it's okay if it doesn't make sense. We're going to trust because I feel it in my heart that this is the path for me. So I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up here today for this session and for continuing to show up in all of the sessions this weekend. There's so many amazing sessions. What's amazing too is, so this is the speaker session. There's also workshops happening simultaneously. So if you come to one and you're like, oh, this person isn't maybe quite my person, check out the workshop because there's going to be a workshop going on simultaneously. And I say that because I am going to be moving into my workshop next, which is not on this live stream. It's on the other live stream. And we're actually going to be doing a sacred space healing meditation. I'm going to share a little bit more of my story. But so if you are someone that needs some time to connect with your loved one that has transitioned, create a sacred space for yourself. Have some time to kind of be alone if you can. If you have kids, get them in front of the TV if you need to, whatever. But spend some time with me in the workshop And we're going to spend a little less than an hour. I'm going to share some of my story, and then we're going to do a guided meditation. And then you're going to have time to write, draw, color, cry, pray, whatever you want to do. But you're going to feel more connected with your loved ones that have transitioned. And that is going to actually help you to give you that permission to say yes to you so you can move forward and be excited about life again. And so if you want to join me for that, take a quick break, go get some water, go get your favorite beverage, and join me on the other workshop, on the workshop link. And if that's not for you, then stay here for the next presentation. It's going to be phenomenal. There's so many amazing speakers here this weekend. And I just want to send you all so much light and love. Again, if you want to connect with me, just look me up on Facebook or Instagram, Michelle Vande. Just send me a message, say you found me on the Global Grief Conference. Otherwise, you can just go to lightoflovecoaching.com. You can find me there. I would love to invite you to my free Facebook group where I do live trainings like this once a week, usually about 30 minutes or so. And you get to be in community with other people that have experienced something similar to you. So thank you all so much. And we will see you around the conference.